Just as you can precisely target exactly where the bomb is going to fall, you feel nowadays, can you, in the same way, figure out what effect on the population, what psychological effect the destruction of that target is going to have? Is that part of the equation?
No, and you just don't have any good way of knowing what the effect on the population is going to be of something that happens to them indirectly. It's just beyond our capability to know that kind of thing.
But the Pentagon's interim report on the war states, quote, "It was recognized at the outset that this campaign would cause some unavoidable hardships for the Iraqi populace. It was impossible, for example, to destroy the electrical power supply for Iraqi command and control facilities, yet leave untouched that portion of the electricity supplied to the general populace," end quote. For many Iraqis, the impact of the bombing was immediate and direct. Basra in the south was the most heavily bombed city in the war. Planners and pilots confirmed to us that unlike Baghdad, unguided bombs were freely used here.
From a pilot standpoint, we just hope that there isn't anybody there. Our mission is to drop the bombs on those specific targets, and again, it's unfortunate if somebody happens to be there, and that's the way we look at it. And bombs, they don't always hit where you aim, particularly with the, quote, dumb bombs that we were dropping then. When we drop laser-guided bombs, and the precision munition is a lot higher chance of hitting exactly what I'm looking at or what I'm aiming at than with just plain dumb bombs, because there's a lot of factors once they come off the airplane that make them not always hit where the pilot's aiming at.
There were no evident military targets in El Hakamiyah, a civilian neighborhood in Basra, but residents cannot believe their homes were deliberately bombed. When we found some at a family gathering, they told us it must have been a mistake. Ali Rita, a marine engineer, remembers what happened when the bombs hit at 1 a.m. and killed 18 of his neighbors.
How many houses were hit that night?
Well, from that street to there, 48.
48 houses?
48 houses, yes.
How long did the bombing last?
About 3 or 4 minutes. Boom, 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 boom. With continuing bombing, it's very tragic.
This is it's a cluster bomb. You were here?
Yes.
And this fell on your house or in the garden?
Of the roughly 88,000 tons dropped by coalition air forces during the war, I think no more than about 7,000 or 8,000 tons were precision munitions, if that's the right word.
That's right, about 10%.
So why did you have to drop the other 80,000 tons?
Because you didn't have enough of the precision weapons, not so much enough of the precision weapons, but you did not have enough of the precision platforms to depend entirely on the precision weapons. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that the non-precision bombs are just exactly that. They are non-precision. One almost needs to think of them like the pellets in the shotgun shell that you use when you're shooting skeet. There may be 500 tiny pellets in one of these shells. If, when you are shooting skeet, that 5 of those pellets hit the clay pigeon, then you see this as being a great success. Well, it is a great success, but the other way to look at it is that 99% of those pellets miss their target, which is not relevant.
Colonel Pingle's own tape confirms that bombs sometimes missed.
Okay, impact. It looked like a little bit short on the right-hand side of the power plant. Okay.
We were the first to tell the pilot what he hit.
One of the bombs that first night actually hit their air raid shelter.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And killed 7 people. Now, did you know there was an air raid shelter there?
No. We attempt to the best of our ability to hit the specific aim points, and the aim points that we pick are the military significant, the power plant. We don't go around bombing air raid shelters.
But 4 weeks into the war, on February 13th, this shelter in the Amaria district of Baghdad was hit with 2 laser-guided 2,000-pound bombs. This time, it was military intelligence that failed. Over 200 neighborhood women and children were incinerated. Without any assistance from Iraqi officials, we found some of the very few who got out alive.
When the first bomb hit, I couldn't believe it. I told myself it was impossible for them to target women and children. When the second bomb hit, the electricity went out and rubble fell all around us.
How many of your children were with you?
2. I took them every night after the war started on January 17th.
Did your children manage to escape with you?
No. I managed to get my son Ahmed out after about an hour, but I couldn't reach my son Samir. He was under the bomb. It was impossible to get him out.
Who came with you to the shelter?
My mother only.
I was sound asleep and didn't see a thing. Suddenly, I jumped at the sound of the explosion and ran to the corridor which leads to the entrance. Everything was blacked out.
And when did you realize, after you'd escaped, that your mother was still inside?
I was the first one out. I didn't see anybody leaving, so I knew my mother was still inside. One of the gates was open, and I tried to get back in. The fire was raging. The heat was intense. I was burned, as you can see, when I tried to get back inside.
The mistake that got a lot of publicity during the war was the Al-Maria shelter in Baghdad. Can you explain to us how that came about?
That it was your word that was a mistake. That was not a mistake. That was very deliberately targeted because it was an Iraqi military facility, and it happened to be a very important one. Now, why that there were civilians in that military facility, we simply do not know. That there were, it was clear that we all regretted the loss of life on the civilian side there. We felt very bad about it, but it was nevertheless, it was a very important military facility, and we just plain did not know that there were civilians in there. We had no way to know that.
We searched through the entire shelter looking for evidence that might support the Pentagon's claim. In the basement, we found the original blueprints scorched and waterlogged. We found no sign of a military command post, but the shelter was sophisticated, equipped to protect against nuclear and chemical attack. We then discovered what the Pentagon apparently did not know. Before the war, this shelter was reserved for the exclusive use of civilian professionals. They never used it. Professor Nabil Al-Tawil was one of them.
When the attack started on the 17th of January, they opened these shelters for everybody in the neighborhood can go there.
So the original idea was to restrict it to key people like yourself.
Let's say VIPs or the elite people with PhDs in different universities and government establishments. We've been issued with identity card by the civil defense, which allows us. For instance, in my ID card, there is 4 members in my family. We can go in. That was me, my wife, and her parents. We can go there. But we didn't make use of it because, as I said, at the beginning of the attack, civil defense decided that it should be open for everybody to go in.
Do you know why you didn't know that there were civilians in there?
The principle of being able to observe a building 24 hours a day and know exactly who comes in and goes out, that's just a very difficult thing to do.
They could have easily seen hundreds of women and children going in and out. Children with their colorful clothes going in and out, carrying their food in and out. This is obviously not a military target. How many children died? How many women died?
Thousands more were to die in revolts in the Shia South and the Kurdish North sparked by the war. The U.S. had hoped that if the bombing strategy could not dislodge Saddam Hussein and his high command, a desperate people would do it for them.
Our presumption had to be that as the Iraqi people saw that the effects of the war were coming home to them, at least indirectly because of the lack of electricity and so on, that the people in one way or another would begin to express their dissatisfaction to the regime to the extent they could.
Iraqis were told that if they overthrew Saddam, the bombing would stop.
There's another way for the bloodshed to stop, and that is for the Iraqi military and the Iraqi people to take matters into their own hands and force Saddam Hussein, the dictator, to step aside.
In Kirkuk and other cities, the Kurds rose up and briefly took control of northern Iraq until Saddam's artillery and helicopters moved in.
When you strike such a serious blow at a dictatorship like that, people are going to rise up. They did rise up. They took advantage of an opportunity. And then, of course, since Saddam was able to survive, they paid a terrible price. There was a sense of bewilderment as to why nothing was happening, why the U.S. and the other countries were so indifferent to what was going on.
Peter Galbraith is a senior staffer for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's championed the Kurds since 1988 and was with them in northern Iraq when their revolt collapsed. The U.S. had repeatedly warned Saddam that it would intervene if he used air power against the rebels. It was an empty threat.
President Bush had issued a call for them to rise up. They assumed that when he made that call, that he meant it, that meant the United States would be supportive of their rebellion. They couldn't understand why the helicopters were continuing to fly. And then at this point, the United States and the other countries stood at a complete arm's length as millions of people were made refugees. It even took an awfully long period of time before the United States was prepared to respond to the humanitarian crisis that was building up on the Turkish border.
What happened the day they left their village? The soldiers of the Saddam attacked us. We all left our houses, monies, animals, lands. We only saved our lives.
Were the soldiers of Saddam bombing the village? What were they doing to the village?
They were bombing, they were attacking with the helicopters, and so we all escaped.
Had they had any assurances from the U.S. or any of its partners that something would be done?
There were no direct contacts between the United States administration and the Iraqi opposition. I repeatedly was in touch with the State Department about whether they want, and the National Security Council about whether they wanted to meet with them. The answer was no, and indeed one NSC aide told me, quote, "Our policy is to get rid of Saddam, not his regime."
What on earth did that mean?
I understood it to mean that the United States did not want to see a rebellion by Iraq's Shia or Kurds succeed.
It wasn't until after the exodus that the U.S. decided to lend a hand escorting the Kurds back to Iraqi territory. U.S. aircraft still patrol a thin strip of northern Iraq, while Kurdish forces hold the ground. They are called the Peshmerga, and some of them have been fighting for a free Kurdistan for 30 years. But trapped in the mountains between Iran, Turkey, and Saddam's Iraq, they have ended up being used by whichever power found it convenient at the time. Still, their numbers have more than doubled since the uprising, bolstered by former conscripts from the Iraqi army and recruits among destitute refugees. 8 separate factions make up the Kurdistan Front. The largest, the Kurdish Democratic Party, took us to this mountain training base on the Iraq-Iran border. Do you have many more Peshmerga than you did in March?
I have more than 30,000 Peshmerga like these Peshmerga, now ready.
Ready to fight?
To fight.
General Hamid Afandi told us that overall, the Kurds now have 100,000 men under arms, and they are training hard.
How do you rate the Kurdish guerrillas, the Peshmerga?
One of the best I've ever seen. As far as the ability to mount a strike
as far as the ability to disregard casualties. They're some of the best.
From the time that the U.S. military buildup began in Saudi Arabia, is it fair to say there was an interest in creating trouble for Saddam in northern Iraq?
Sure.
Using the Kurds?
Sure. Absolutely.
Retired Air Force Colonel Jim McDonald says he helped arm the Kurds before and during the Gulf War. Officially, the U.S. has always denied such help.
So there was a market for military equipment in Kurdistan from, let's say, the fall of 1990?
Yeah.
Colonel McDonald served as a military attaché in the Middle East and in the office of the Secretary of Defense before going into private business, in this case, arms.
What kind of equipment were they looking for?
Mostly small arms.
What kind of small arms?
Semi-automatic weapons, personal arms, that type of thing, the ammunition that goes with them.
Would it have to be an American or German?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because you can go through other markets to meet what those particular requirements are. For example, if you wanted Soviet type of equipment, then you could go through markets through what was then the Warsaw Pact countries, through friendly countries to get into that market.
So you were basically getting Soviet type equipment, which would find its way through the Turks to the Kurds in Iraq, with the blessing of the United States government?
As far as I knew, yes.
The Bush administration has refused to take any responsibility for the rebellion or its failure.
During the uprising by the Kurds and the Shiites in southern Iraq, initially the U.S. officially stated that Saddam could not use his helicopters and his planes. That policy then changed, and the uprisings were put down. Why was there a change of policy?
I don't know. I think all of us were very frustrated by that decision, because if you're going to give an ultimatum, then live up to that ultimatum. Do not let an essentially defenseless people suffer because you gave up that ultimatum.
The Kurds feel that the history of Kurdish-United States relations has been a history of betrayal, and that U.S. policy has wavered between being amoral and immoral. In the 1970s, the United States backed the Kurdish rebellion, provided military assistance through Iran as a means of keeping the Iraqi regime off balance, but never had the intention for the Kurdish rebels to succeed, just to continue the fighting. The Kurds never knew that they were a pawn in this game. I'm afraid that in the present situation, we really have a repeat of that sorry history.
Kurdish leaders who remember the past, like Masoud Barzani, are cautious about American patronage.
How a superpower can betray a very poor people and let them down. I, personally, have come to the conclusion that we, the Kurds, should never be involved in any international game or covert action whatsoever. Everything has to be on the table.
How dependent will you be on the United States to survive as you are now in this part of Iraq?
I hope that we will reach an acceptable deal. I have to tell you that up till now, the US and other countries don't have a specific policy on the Kurds. I don't have much hopes for outside backing. I believe that our problem has to be solved internally with the Iraqi government.
This month, the situation has deteriorated. Skirmishes with the Iraqi army have brought more casualties, more refugees. Negotiations with Saddam have stalled, and the Kurdish leaders know they cannot match Saddam's artillery and tanks.
If the worst happens and the negotiations break down, are you ready for war again with Saddam?
What should we do?
Do you think the Kurds stand a chance of ever achieving any of their aspirations?
No.
The bitter failure of the rebellion has left the Kurds back where they started, inside Saddam's Iraq. The army has retreated south under pressure from the U.S., but electricity, food, and supplies come from Baghdad. For hundreds of thousands of refugees now back from the mountains, supplies are critically short.